My name is Helena Morrison, and I'm 62 years old. The moment I saw my beautiful daughter-in-law secretly drop a white pill into my champagne flute, I knew my 35 years in real estate had taught me something invaluable. Always trust your instincts. The lavish retirement party with 200 distinguished guests, the $23 million deal I'd just signed that morning, everything seemed perfect until that defining moment. Jessica, the daughter-in-law I'd treated like my own flesh and blood after Michael's death, was quietly trying to poison me. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, because her own mother, Dorothy Williams, was the one who grabbed the wrong glass and collapsed in front of all our guests. Before I tell you what happened that horrifying night, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I need to start from that morning, when everything still seemed like a celebration of my life's work, not knowing it would become the night I'd discover my son's death wasn't an accident at all. The fountain pen felt heavier than usual as I signed my name on the final page of the contract. $23 million. After 35 years of building my real estate empire in Arizona, this was it, my swan song. Thomas Reed, my attorney, smiled as he notarized the documents in his downtown Phoenix office. "Congratulations, Helena. The Scottsdale Plaza development is officially sold," he said, sliding the papers into a leather folder. "You know, we should update your estate planning documents soon. With Michael gone for 3 years now, and this new influx of capital—" His words hung in the air like the desert heat outside. Michael. My only son, killed in a car accident on Interstate 17 3 years ago. The investigators said brake failure, a tragic malfunction on a rainy night. Jessica had been inconsolable, or so I'd thought. "I'll think about it, Thomas," I managed, standing to leave. He handed me something unexpected, a small boutique box. "A retirement gift," he said with an odd intensity in his eyes. "It's a commemorative pin with a tiny camera. Document your party tonight. You'll want to remember every moment." I thanked him, thinking it was an unusual gift, but Thomas had always been eccentric. As I walked to my Tesla in the parking garage, my phone rang. Jessica's melodic voice filled the car. "Mom, Mother and I arrived early to help you set up. You shouldn't be doing everything alone on your special day." Mom. She'd started calling me that 6 months after Michael died, when I'd held her through another crying spell. She'd been the perfect daughter-in-law, refusing to date, dedicating herself to keeping Michael's memory alive. How could I have known she was keeping other secrets? "That's sweet, dear. I'll be home in 20 minutes. "Perfect. Oh, and Mom, I have a very special surprise for you tonight, something that will change everything." The way she said everything should have been my first warning. But I was too caught up in the bittersweet emotions of retirement, of closing this chapter of my life. The drive to my Scottsdale estate took me through Paradise Valley, past the Camelback Mountain that Michael used to hike every Sunday morning. He'd been training for a marathon when he died, always pushing himself, always reaching for more. My $8 million estate came into view, 5 acres of manicured desert landscape, with a main house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. I'd bought it 15 years ago, when Michael graduated from law school. He was supposed to take over the business eventually. Plans. God laughs at plans. Jessica's white Mercedes was parked in the circular driveway alongside an older Honda Civic that belonged to her mother, Dorothy. As I entered through the grand foyer, I heard voices from the great room where the catering staff was setting up. "Need to know about the will, Jessica. This is important." Dorothy's sharp voice carried clearly. I paused in the hallway, listening. "Mother, please, not today. This is Helena's celebration." "Don't be naive. She's 62, alone, and worth what, 40 million? 50? You need to secure your position." I said not today. There was steel in Jessica's voice I'd never heard before. I made noise with my keys and entered the room with a bright smile. Dorothy immediately transformed, rushing to embrace me. "Helena, the woman of the hour! This place looks absolutely magnificent." The great room had been transformed into an elegant venue with round tables dressed in cream linens and gold accents. The stage where I'd make my toast was flanked by towers of white orchids. Cases of Cristal champagne, 2008 vintage, $500 a bottle, were being carefully arranged by the bar. "Thank you for coming early to help," I said, noting how Jessica avoided my eyes. "Of course, we're family," Dorothy gushed, though her smile never reached her eyes. "Jessica, show Helena what you've been working on." For the next hour, I watched Jessica orchestrate the setup with surprising efficiency. She checked every champagne flute personally, insisting on perfection. Her dedication touched me, even as something nagged at the back of my mind, a detail I couldn't quite place. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors as more vendors arrived. Jessica supervised each one with an intensity that seemed excessive for a retirement party. I tried to help, but she gently guided me to the master suite. "You need to get ready, Mom. The guests will arrive in 2 hours." In my bedroom, I fastened Thomas's camera pin to my dress, an elegant black Chanel piece I'd bought for the occasion. Through my window, I could see Dorothy on the pool deck, her phone pressed to her ear. The sliding door was cracked and her voice drifted up. $23 million from the morning deal, plus this house, plus her portfolio. Jessica will inherit at least 30, maybe 35 million. My blood chilled. I moved closer to the window, careful to stay hidden. No, the old woman trusts her completely. After tonight, everything changes. Jessica knows what to do. A knock on my door made me jump. "Helena, it's Thomas Reed. May I come in?" Strange. I hadn't expected him at the party this early. I opened the door to find him in a different suit, looking serious. "I wanted to make sure you're wearing the pin," he said quietly, glancing down the hallway. "Keep it on all evening, no matter what." "Thomas, what's going on?" "Just trust me. And Helena, whatever happens tonight, stay calm and let things play out. Can you do that?" Before I could respond, Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs. "Mr. Reed, how wonderful you're here early. Mom, the champagne sommelier wants to review the toast selection with you." Thomas squeezed my shoulder and left. I followed Jessica downstairs, my mind racing. In the kitchen, she was everywhere at once, checking the canapes, instructing the waitstaff, examining the champagne bottles with peculiar attention. "Jessica, dear, you seem stressed." "Just want everything perfect for you, Mom." She pulled me into a hug that felt like a goodbye. "You've been so good to me since Michael died. I want tonight to be unforgettable." Unforgettable. Another word that would take on new meaning later. Dorothy appeared with a silver clutch purse. "Jessica, I have a splitting headache. Do you have any Advil?" "Check Mom's purse," Jessica said quickly. "She always carries some." I watched Dorothy rifle through my Hermes bag on the counter, her movements too thorough for someone just looking for pain medication. She pulled out my prescription bottle, heart medication I'd taken since a mild episode 2 years ago. "Just Advil, Dorothy, left side pocket." She found it, but not before examining my prescription label intently. "Digoxin, that's quite serious, isn't it?" "Routine management," I said, taking my bag back. "Nothing dramatic." The first guests began arriving at 6 o'clock. The who's who of Arizona, the governor, state senators, prominent developers, old friends from the Phoenix Country Club. Each greeting felt like a small goodbye to the life I'd known. Jessica transformed into the perfect hostess, charming everyone with stories about my career achievements. Helena closed her first $1 million deal in 1994, she told a group of younger agents, back when $1 million actually meant something. Dorothy stayed close to her daughter, occasionally whispering urgently in her ear. I mingled, accepted congratulations, but kept finding my attention drawn to Jessica. She touched my champagne glass 3 times, adjusting its position on my designated table at the stage. At 7:30, as the desert sunset painted the sky orange and pink, I noticed Jessica by the bar with a small white clutch, not the silver one her mother had carried earlier. She was standing near the champagne display, her back to the room, her shoulders tense with concentration. Through the reflection in the mirror behind the bar, I saw her hand move quickly over 2 specific glasses, the ones marked with small gold ribbons for the toast. My glass and hers. Her hand paused over mine, and something small and white disappeared into the champagne. My heart hammered, but I kept smiling at the mayor's wife, who was complimenting my dress. 35 years of negotiations had taught me to never show my cards. I excused myself to check on the sound system, my mind calculating rapidly. The camera pin felt warm against my chest, recording everything. Jessica turned from the bar, her face composed, and caught my eye. She smiled, that same sweet smile that had comforted me through my grief. "Mom, it's time for your toast." It's time. The estate filled with Phoenix's elite like a gallery opening, each arrival adding another layer of sophistication to the evening. Governor Patricia Holbrook made an entrance at 8 o'clock sharp, her security detail discreetly positioning themselves around the property. I greeted her near the fountain, the sound of water masking our conversation. "Helena, this is magnificent. You're really walking away from all this?" 35 years is enough, Governor. Time for the next chapter." She studied me with the shrewd eyes that had won her 2 terms. "You never struck me as someone who retires quietly. What's really going on?" Before I could answer, Jessica appeared with a champagne flute for the governor. "Mrs. Holbrook, such an honor to have you here. Helena has told me so much about your friendship." The governor accepted the glass but didn't drink, her political instincts always on alert. "Jessica, isn't it? Michael's widow. I remember you from the funeral." Something flickered across Jessica's face. Annoyance? Fear? It vanished instantly. "Yes, that was a difficult time, but Helena has been my rock. I don't know what I would have done without her." Dorothy materialized beside her daughter, dressed in an inappropriately young cocktail dress that showed too much sun-damaged décolletage. "Governor, I'm Dorothy Williams, Jessica's mother. Isn't it wonderful how Helena has taken care of my daughter? So generous, so trusting." The last word hung in the air like a threat. The governor's eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw her security detail shift almost imperceptibly. "Family is everything," the governor said carefully. "Helena, shall we discuss that conservation easement for the Pinnacle Peak property?" It was an excuse to pull me away, and I took it gratefully. As we walked toward my study, she spoke quietly. "That woman is circling you like a vulture. And the daughter? Something's off. You always did have good instincts, Pat. It's kept me alive in politics. Watch yourself tonight." In my study, I showed her the conservation documents, but my mind was on the champagne glass with the white pill dissolving in it. Through the window, I could see Jessica moving through the crowd, playing the gracious hostess, occasionally glancing at her watch. Dorothy shadowed her, whispering constantly. We returned to find the party in full swing. 200 guests mingled across the terraces and through the house. The Phoenix Symphony String Quartet played in the garden. Everything looked perfect, a successful woman's victory lap. State Senator Marcus Webb cornered me near the pool. "Helena, I heard about the Scottsdale Plaza sale. $23 million is impressive in this market." "The Chinese investors were motivated," I said, watching Jessica over his shoulder. She was by my designated table again, adjusting the champagne glasses for the 3rd time. "Speaking of investments, I'm looking for partners on a new medical complex." "Marcus, I'm retiring, remember?" He laughed. "People like us don't retire, Helena. We just find new games to play." How prophetic those words would prove to be. At 8:45, Jessica found me speaking with my banker, Richard Stone, and his wife. Her hand touched my elbow gently. "Mom, 15 minutes until the toast. Should we get you positioned?" "Actually, dear, I need to powder my nose first." "I'll come with you," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Don't be silly. Entertain our guests. I'll just be a moment." In the bathroom, I locked the door and examined myself in the mirror. 62 years old, worth $43 million, about to drink poisoned champagne from someone I'd loved like a daughter. I thought about Michael, about the night the police called. Jessica had been visiting her mother in Tucson, or so she'd said. The brake line failure had been clean, suspicious, but without evidence. A knock interrupted my thoughts. "Helena, you okay in there?" Dorothy's voice, concerned and false. "Perfect, Dorothy. Be right out." I opened the door to find both Dorothy and Jessica waiting, twin smiles of anticipation on their faces. "We should head to the stage," Jessica said, linking her arm through mine. Everyone's waiting. As we walked through my home, past the photos of Michael, past the life I'd built, Jessica leaned close. I want you to know, Mom, that everything I've done has been for Michael. He would want me to be taken care of. The words chilled me more than the pill in my champagne. As we approached the stage, I saw the 2 ribboned glasses waiting on the small table, catching the light like liquid gold. One for me, one for her, one with poison. But which one would actually be drunk? The stage lights felt warm on my face as I climbed the 3 steps, Jessica steadying my elbow with false concern. 200 faces turned toward us, conversations dying like wind through the desert. The champagne glasses sat on the small table, 2 crystal flutes with gold ribbons waiting like loaded weapons. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jessica's voice rang clear through the microphone, "please join me in honoring Helena Morrison, a woman who built an empire and changed the face of Phoenix real estate." Applause filled the room. I smiled, my eyes never leaving those glasses. Through my peripheral vision, I caught Thomas Reed near the back, his hand resting casually on his hip where I'd seen the slight bulge of a concealed carry earlier. Strange for a real estate attorney. Jessica continued her speech, each word dripping with false honey. "When I lost my husband Michael 3 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But Helena, Mom, she saved me. She gave me purpose, family, a reason to continue." Dorothy pushed through the crowd to stand directly below the stage, her phone raised to record. Her eyes glittered with anticipation. "And so tonight," Jessica picked up both glasses, "I want to propose a special toast." She handed me the glass on the left, the one I'd seen her poison. To retirement, to family, and to new beginnings. The weight of the crystal felt significant in my hand. 200 people raised their glasses in response. Jessica lifted hers, that sweet smile never wavering. "But first," I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need to adjust this microphone. Jessica, could you help?" I set my glass down on the right side of the table and fiddled with the microphone stand. Jessica set her glass on the left to help me, her hands occupied with the adjustment. In that split second, as she focused on the technical difficulty I'd created, I performed the switch I'd rehearsed in my mind a dozen times since seeing her poison my drink. My hand moved smoothly, naturally, exchanging our glasses while her attention was diverted. "There," she said, satisfied with the microphone. "Perfect." We picked up our glasses again, but now I held hers and she held mine. The poisoned champagne glowed in her hand and she was none the wiser. "To Helena Morrison," someone shouted from the crowd. "To Mom," Jessica said softly, looking directly into my eyes. We raised our glasses, but before either of us could drink, Dorothy's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Wait, Jessica darling, let me have a sip first, for luck." She reached up from below the stage, her weathered hand grasping for Jessica's glass, the poisoned one meant for me. "Mother, no!" Jessica started, but Dorothy had already grabbed the flute from her daughter's hand. "Nonsense! This is a celebration!" Dorothy took a large swallow of the champagne, then another. "To our dear, generous, trusting Helena." The effect was almost immediate. Dorothy's eyes widened, her hand going to her throat. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor in an explosion of crystal and gold ribbon. She stumbled backward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Mother!" Jessica leaped from the stage, her perfect composure finally cracking. Dorothy collapsed into her daughter's arms, convulsing. "Someone call 911, I commanded, though I'd already seen 3 people pulling out phones. The crowd erupted in chaos. Governor Holbrook's security detail immediately formed a perimeter. Dr. James Patterson, a cardiac surgeon and club member, pushed through to Dorothy's side. "She's having a seizure," he announced, checking her pupils. "This looks like acute poisoning. Everyone back." Jessica cradled her mother's head, real tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please, stay with me." But her eyes found mine across the chaos, and in them I saw the terrible realization. She knew I knew. The mask she'd worn for 3 years had finally slipped. What was in that champagne? Dr. Patterson demanded, looking between Jessica and me. I don't know, I said calmly, holding up my untouched glass. I haven't drunk anything yet. Thomas Reed appeared beside me, his hand still near his hip. Nobody touch any of the glasses. This is now a crime scene. You're an attorney, not a cop, someone protested. Actually, Thomas pulled out a badge I'd never seen before. I'm both. FBI, Financial Crimes Division. We've been investigating suspicious deaths tied to inheritance fraud. Jessica's face went white. She stood slowly, her mother still convulsing on the floor. This is insane. My mother is dying and your mother ingested Rohypnol mixed with digitalis, Thomas said. A combination that would have caused cardiac arrest in someone already taking heart medication. Like Helena here. The room went silent except for Dorothy's labored breathing. Every eye turned to Jessica. That's impossible, she whispered. How could you know? She stopped, realizing her mistake. An innocent person would have denied it entirely, not questioned how he knew. Because we've been watching you for 3 months, Mrs. Morrison, ever since we found evidence that your husband's brake lines were deliberately cut. The next minutes unfolded like a nightmare played at double speed. Paramedics burst through the front entrance, their equipment cases banging against the doorframe. Dorothy's convulsions had stopped, but her breathing was shallow, rattled. Dr. Patterson directed them with clinical efficiency, while Jessica hovered, her designer dress now stained with her mother's saliva and tears. Possible Rohypnol and digitalis combination, Dr. Patterson told the lead paramedic. She needs activated charcoal and cardiac monitoring immediately. As they loaded Dorothy onto the stretcher, Jessica turned on me with venom I'd never seen before. You did this! You poisoned her! Interesting accusation, Thomas Reed said, stepping between us. Helena hasn't touched her champagne, but we have this. He held up his phone, showing a clear video, from my camera pin, of Jessica dropping something into the champagne glass. The crowd gasped collectively. Governor Holbrook moved closer, her security detail tight around her. That's fake, Jessica stammered. Deep fake technology. She's setting me up. Is that why you checked Helena's heart medication earlier? Thomas asked. Dorothy was quite interested in that digoxin prescription. We have that on camera, too. I watched my daughter-in-law, this woman I'd held through grief, who'd called me Mom, who'd spent 3 Christmases at my table, transform into someone I didn't recognize. Her beautiful face contorted with rage and desperation. You stupid old bitch, she snarled at me. You were supposed to drink it. You were supposed to die gracefully, tragically, at your own retirement party. A heart attack brought on by excitement. Clean, simple. Jessica, stop talking, someone said. I realized it was her friend from the country club, Melissa Chen, who happened to be a defense attorney. But Jessica was beyond reason. 3 years. 3 years I've played the grieving widow. Do you know how exhausting it's been? Pretending to mourn that controlling bastard, pretending to love you? Each word was a knife, but I stood straight, my hand finding Thomas's arm for support. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording everything. This would be on every news channel by morning. Michael found out about Trevor, didn't he? I said quietly. Your personal trainer, the one you were seeing behind his back. Jessica's face went white, then red. How did you... I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. After I found Michael's journal in the attic, he suspected you were cheating. He was going to divorce you, cut you off completely. So you cut his brake lines instead. Prove it, she hissed. We already have, Thomas said. Trevor Matheson confessed 2 weeks ago. He's been in federal custody telling us everything. How you planned it together. How you waited until Michael drove to Flagstaff for that deposition. How Trevor followed him to make sure the brakes failed on that mountain curve. The room erupted. People pushed forward, shouting questions. Phoenix PD officers appeared. When had they arrived, moving through the crowd with practiced efficiency? Jessica looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. Where's Trevor? She demanded. He wouldn't... He took a plea deal, Thomas explained. 15 years instead of life. He told us about the insurance policies, the forged documents, even the backup plan to poison Helena if the inheritance wasn't processed quickly enough. I thought I'd prepared myself for the truth, but hearing it confirmed, knowing my son's death was murder, nearly brought me to my knees. The governor's hand found my shoulder, steadying me. "Mrs. Morrison," one of the Phoenix officers stepped forward. "We need you to come with us." Jessica laughed, high and hysterical. "For what? You have nothing. Hearsay from an ex-lover? A video that could be doctored? My mother accidentally drinking from the wrong glass?" "We have the pill bottle in your purse," Thomas said calmly. "The one you transferred from your mother's bag when she asked for Advil. Your fingerprints are all over it." That's when Jessica ran. She bolted toward the French doors leading to the pool area, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. But she'd forgotten about the governor's security detail. A former Navy SEAL in a black suit caught her before she made it 3 steps, bringing her down with professional efficiency. The sound she made when she hit the floor, part scream, part sob, echoed through my home. "Jessica Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and the murder of Michael Morrison," the officer said, pulling her to her feet. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her dress torn at the shoulder. As they cuffed her, she looked at me one last time. "He never loved me, you know. It was always Mom thinks this or Mom built that. Even in bed, he'd talk about you. Your precious son was a mama's boy who couldn't cut the cord." "And you killed him for it," I said quietly. They dragged her out through the same front door where she'd entered as a bride 7 years ago. The crowd parted silently, cameras flashing, documenting her fall from grace. Someone had called the news vans. They were already pulling up outside. In the sudden quiet that followed, I heard Dorothy being loaded into the ambulance, still unconscious but stable. The paramedics said she'd probably survive, though there might be permanent damage. I stood in my ruined party, surrounded by overturned chairs and shattered crystal, and felt nothing. Just a vast emptiness where my heart should be. You know, standing there in my designer dress, watching my daughter-in-law get arrested for murdering my son, I realized something. We spend so much time trying to see the good in people that we ignore the warnings right in front of us. Have you ever had that feeling, that little voice saying something's wrong, but you pushed it aside because you wanted to believe in someone? I did, for 3 years. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by family, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments where you're from and what time it is there. And please, subscribe if you want to hear how a 62-year-old widow fought back against the people who killed her only child. Now let me tell you what happened next. The guests had been asked to leave, but a core group remained. The governor, Thomas Reed, several FBI agents who'd been posing as guests, and my personal attorney, Charles Brennan, whom someone had called. We gathered in my study, away from the crime scene tape now decorating my great room. "Helena, we need to get your statement," Thomas said, his fake attorney persona completely gone. "But first, I owe you an explanation." "You think?" I laughed bitterly. 3 months of investigation and you let me walk into this? We needed her to act. Without attempted murder charges, we only had circumstantial evidence for Michael's death. Tonight gave us everything. "You used me as bait." "You used yourself as bait," he corrected. "You switched those glasses on your own. We didn't know she'd poisoned the champagne until it happened." Governor Holbrook poured me a scotch from my private collection. "Helena, there's something else you should know. I asked Thomas to look into Michael's death. It never sat right with me, the timing, the circumstances." "You?" I stared at my old friend. "You started this investigation?" "Michael called me the night before he died. He said Jessica was dangerous, that he'd found evidence she'd been stealing from your company. He was going to confront her when he got back from Flagstaff." The scotch burned my throat, but it helped ground me in reality. My son had known. He'd tried to protect me, and it had cost him his life. "I need to see her," I said suddenly. "Jessica, before they take her away." "That's not advisable," Charles Brennan protested. "Anything you say could compromise the prosecution." "I don't care. I need answers." Thomas made a call. 10 minutes later, they brought Jessica to the pool house, still cuffed, flanked by 2 officers. Her designer dress was ruined, her face streaked with mascara, but her eyes, those pretty green eyes that had fooled me for years, burned with hatred. "Come to gloat?" she spat. "I came to understand. Was any of it real? Any moment in 7 years?" She laughed, ugly and sharp. "Real? You want real? Here's real. I met Michael at that charity auction specifically to get to you. Mother researched every wealthy widow in Phoenix. You were perfect. 1 son, no other family, desperate for connection." Each word was calculated to wound, but I needed to hear it. "We Google you, Helena. Your husband's death, the insurance money you used to build your empire. You were vulnerable. Michael was just the way in." "So you never loved him?" "I loved his trust fund. I loved his future inheritance. I loved that he was too stupid to get a prenup because Mommy told him I was such a nice girl." "When did you decide to kill him?" "When he found the text with Trevor. He was going to divorce me, leave me with nothing after 4 years of playing house. I couldn't start over. I'm 28, Helena. I'm not getting younger." 28. She said it like she was ancient, like she'd had no choice but murder. "And tonight, you would have watched me die? I would have cried beautifully at your funeral, worn black Chanel, inherited everything as the grieving daughter you'd emotionally adopted. Mother had it all planned." "Dorothy was in on it from the beginning?" Jessica's face finally cracked. "She's the one who found Michael's route to Flagstaff. She's the one who bought the tools to cut the brake lines. She's the one who—" She stopped, realizing she was confessing to conspiracy. "She's going to survive," I told her, "and when she wakes up, she'll be charged as your accomplice." For the first time, real fear flickered across Jessica's face. She didn't know about tonight. The poison was my idea. Trying to protect Mommy? How touching. Go to hell, Helena. I've been there for 3 years, thinking I lost my son to an accident. At least now I know the truth. The officers moved to take her away, but I had one more question. The baby story you told everyone, about trying to get pregnant before Michael died, was that a lie too? She smiled, cold and cruel. I had my tubes tied at 21, but grieving young widows who lost their chance at motherhood, they get so much sympathy, and sympathy opens wallets. They dragged her out then, her designer heels scraping against the stone path. I stood in the doorway watching until the police car disappeared down my driveway, taking away the woman I'd thought of as a daughter. Thomas Reed appeared beside me. "There's more, Helena. We found documents in Jessica's apartment, forged papers making her beneficiary on accounts Michael never knew existed. She's been stealing from you for years." "How much?" "About $2 million, hidden in offshore accounts." $2 million, the price of my son's life, apparently. "We'll recover most of it," Thomas continued. "But Helena, there's something else. Something good, actually." I couldn't imagine what could possibly be good about any of this. Thomas led me back to the study, where a young woman sat nervously on my leather sofa. She was maybe 25, with dark hair and kind eyes that reminded me painfully of Michael's. She stood when I entered, wringing her hands. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm Laura Chen. I was Michael's nurse at Phoenix General." I frowned, confused. Michael wasn't sick. Why would he need a nurse? "Not for him," she said softly. "He was volunteering in our pediatric ward, every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years before he died. He never told you?" I sank into my chair, another piece of my son revealing itself. "He said he had evening meetings. He didn't want you to know because he was investigating something. My supervisor, Dr. Patricia Wells, was stealing medications and selling them. Opioids, mostly. Michael was gathering evidence to report her." "My son was investigating drug theft?" Laura nodded. "He had almost enough proof when he died. After the accident, I tried to continue his work, but I was scared. Then Agent Reed contacted me last month." Thomas pulled out a folder. Michael had documented everything. He was going to the FBI the day after he returned from Flagstaff. Dr. Wells is now serving 15 years federal time, thanks to your son's work. My chest tightened. My son, my careful, thoughtful son, had been fighting corruption while his own wife planned his murder. "There's more," Laura said hesitantly. "Michael and we became close. Not romantically," she added quickly. "He loved Jessica, or thought he did, but he confided in me about his marriage problems. He gave me something to keep safe." She pulled out a safety deposit box key. "He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to you. But after the accident, Jessica was always around you. I was afraid." "What's in the box?" "Evidence. Photos of Jessica with Trevor, financial records showing she was siphoning money, and," she paused, "a new will he'd drafted but hadn't signed yet. He was leaving everything to charity in your name, nothing to Jessica." I held the key, its weight significant in my palm. "He knew she was dangerous. The night before he left for Flagstaff, he called me," Laura continued. "He said he was going to confront Jessica when he returned, demand a divorce. He sounded relieved, like he'd finally made a decision, and 12 hours later he was dead."
"Mrs. Morrison," Thomas interrupted gently, "there's something else Laura hasn't told you." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm pregnant. 3 months. The father was one of the other volunteers at the hospital, David Park. He was killed in Afghanistan last month." I didn't understand the relevance until she continued. "Michael had introduced us. He was so happy when David and I started dating. He said—" She swallowed hard. "He said you'd always wanted grandchildren, and since he couldn't give them to you with Jessica, maybe you'd adopt me and David instead. It was a joke, but now you're alone and pregnant," I finished. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I just thought you should know that Michael was good. He was kind. He helped people. Whatever Jessica says, whoever she claims he was, that's not the man I knew." I studied this young woman my son had mentored, protected, cared about. She was everything Jessica wasn't: genuine, selfless, brave. "When are you due?" "January. It's a boy. I was going to name him Michael, if that's okay." For the first time in 3 years, I felt tears that weren't born of grief or rage, but something else. Hope, maybe. "Laura, do you have family?" "My parents died when I was in college. It's just me." I made a decision that would have seemed insane 3 hours ago. "Would you like to stay here tonight? The guest house is empty, and after everything that's happened, I could use the company." Her eyes widened. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. Michael would have wanted—" I stopped, correcting myself. "I want to help. No strings, no obligations, just let me help." Thomas Reed smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "Helena, there's one more thing. We've been investigating similar cases across the Southwest. Jessica and Dorothy weren't working alone. There's a network of women targeting wealthy widows and widowers. Jessica was supposed to recruit others after securing your fortune." "How many victims?" "At least 12 that we know of. 3 dead under suspicious circumstances. Your case will help us save the others." I stood, suddenly exhausted, but also strangely energized. "Then we'd better make sure she's convicted. Laura, will you testify about what Michael told you?" "Yes, he deserves justice." "He deserves to be remembered correctly," I corrected. "Not as Jessica's victim, but as someone who fought back against corruption, who helped people, who died trying to do the right thing." Outside, the last of the police cars pulled away. My retirement party had become a crime scene, my daughter-in-law a murderer, my entire life revealed as a carefully constructed lie. But in that destruction, something new was emerging, a truth I could build on. "Agent Reed," I said formally, "I want to help with your investigation. Full access to my records, my contacts, whatever you need." "We were hoping you'd say that." The grandfather clock in my study chimed midnight. Laura had gone to rest in the guest house, and only Thomas Reed and I remained, surrounded by boxes of evidence his team had brought in. He poured himself coffee from the service that appeared. When had someone made coffee? "Helena, I need to tell you the complete truth now," he said.
his FBI facade fully in place. We've been watching Jessica for longer than 3 months. How long? Since the week after Michael's funeral. I set down my scotch, my hand trembling slightly. 3 years? You've known for 3 years? Suspected. We had a witness who saw someone matching Trevor's description near Michael's car the night before the accident. But without concrete evidence, we couldn't move. Jessica was careful. She used burner phones, paid cash, deleted everything. So you let her roam free? Let her continue her charade? We had to, but we watched. Every move, every transaction, every meeting with her mother. We knew she'd eventually try again. These types always do. They get greedy, impatient. And I was the bait. No, Thomas said firmly. You were never bait. 3 weeks ago, you called Governor Holbrook about updating your will. You mentioned feeling uneasy about Jessica, said she'd been asking about your finances more frequently. I remembered that call. Pat had seemed oddly insistent that I meet with Thomas Reed specifically. The governor knew who you really were? She's been helping us track this network for 2 years. Her own sister was a victim in New Mexico, survived but lost everything. So when I signed the Scottsdale Plaza deal, we knew Jessica would see it as her moment. $23 million in liquid assets? She couldn't resist. We had 50 agents at your party tonight, Helena. Servers, guests, even the string quartet. You were never in real danger. But the poison, we didn't know about that until it happened. But Dr. Patterson, he's not really a cardiac surgeon. He's our toxicology expert. The paramedics were our people. Dorothy was never in real danger either. We switched the ambulance crew. She's currently in federal custody, fully conscious, trying to make a deal. My world tilted again. The entire party was staged? Not staged, controlled. Every real guest was there, but surrounded by agents. We needed Jessica to feel confident, to make her move publicly. Private poisoning could be explained away. Public attempted murder with 200 witnesses? That's ironclad. The camera pin? Real, but also redundant. We had 14 different angles on that champagne switch. You did that yourself, by the way. We were prepared to intervene, but you handled it perfectly. I laughed, short and bitter. 35 years of hostile takeover negotiations finally paid off. Helena, there's something else. Something we discovered last week that changed everything. He pulled out a tablet showing bank records. Michael hired a private investigator 2 months before he died. He didn't just know about the affair, he knew about Jessica's past. What past? Her name isn't really Jessica Williams. It's Jennifer Walsh. She's wanted in Florida for elder fraud. Married a man named Robert Morrison there. No relation to your Michael. And he died of heart failure 2 years into the marriage. She inherited $4 million. She's done this before. At least twice that we can prove. Dorothy isn't her real mother either. They're partners, maybe lovers. We're still investigating that connection. I felt sick. Everything I'd known, every memory of the past 7 years was false. Michael found out, didn't he? That's why she had to kill him immediately. We found his investigators' reports hidden in that safety deposit box Laura mentioned. He was going to have her arrested the day he returned. She knew it was kill or be exposed. All those nights I comforted her, all those tears, were practice for your eventual death. Helena, I know this is devastating, but you've helped us save lives. The network Jessica was part of has killed at least 8 people that we know of. Tonight, we got enough evidence to take them all down. A knock interrupted us. An agent entered with a laptop. Sir, Dorothy Williams is ready to talk. Full confession in exchange for a deal. Thomas looked at me. Do you want to watch? Yes. On the screen, Dorothy sat in an interrogation room, looking nothing like the sophisticated woman from the party. Without her makeup and designer clothes, she looked older, harder. Jessica was supposed to be my retirement plan, she said to the interviewer. I taught her everything. How to identify targets, how to play the grieving widow, how to forge documents. But she got sloppy with Michael. Fell for that trainer. I told her affairs were dangerous, but she wouldn't listen. And Helena Morrison? Should have been easy. Lonely old woman, desperate for family. Jessica played her perfectly until tonight. I don't know how Helena knew about the poison." "She didn't," the interviewer said. "She just trusted her instincts." Dorothy laughed. "Instincts. 30 years of planning undone by instincts." Thomas closed the laptop. "She'll testify against Jessica in exchange for 20 years instead of life. Jessica will get the death penalty for Michael's murder." The death penalty. The young woman who'd called me Mom would die by lethal injection. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd tried to poison me and would die by poison herself. "Are you all right?" Thomas asked. "I will be," I said, and meant it, once justice is served. Dawn was breaking over Camelback Mountain when Charles Brennan arrived with his notary and 2 witnesses from his firm. The crime scene tape had been removed, the great room cleaned, though I'd never host another party in that space. Too many ghosts now. "Helena, we need to discuss your estate planning," Charles said, spreading documents across the dining room table. "With Jessica eliminated as a beneficiary, your entire fortune needs redistribution." Governor Holbrook had stayed through the night, a true friend. She sat beside me now, her hand on my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, Helena, make sure it's what you want, not what you think Michael would have wanted." I'd been thinking about this for hours. $43 million, the empire I'd built from my first husband's life insurance, the fortune that had cost me my son. "I want to establish the Michael Morrison Foundation," I said clearly, "for pediatric care and elderly fraud prevention. Laura Chen will be the executive director once she's ready." Charles's eyebrows rose. "The nurse? Helena, are you sure?" "She carries more of Michael's legacy than anyone. He trusted her with evidence that could have saved his life. Yes, I'm sure." "And the house?" I looked around the estate that had been my pride. "Sell it. Use the proceeds for the foundation's endowment." "Where will you live?" "I'm keeping the Paradise Valley cottage. 2 bedrooms are enough." I paused. 3 bedrooms. I'm adding a nursery." Pat Holbrook smiled. "For Laura's baby?" "My grandson, in every way that matters. Michael would have loved that child. I'll love him for both of us." Charles drafted the documents with efficient precision. As I signed, I felt Michael's presence, not the bitter ghost of recent revelations, but my real son. The one who volunteered at hospitals, who fought corruption, who tried to protect me even when facing his own danger. "There's a problem," Charles said suddenly. "Jessica technically inherited Michael's estate when he died. Even with her arrest, that money is legally hers until conviction." "How much?" "About $6 million. Money she'd used to live comfortably while planning my death. The fury that rose in me was white-hot and pure. "There might be a way," Thomas Reed said from the doorway. He'd been coordinating with his team, but had returned for this moment. "Dorothy's confession includes detailed accounts of Jessica's spending. Every penny from Michael's estate went to criminal enterprise, hiring accomplices, buying poisons, paying for surveillance on you. We can freeze it all as proceeds of crime." "Do it." "Already in motion. Judge Martinez signed the order an hour ago." Charles continued with the will. "The foundation gets $30 million. Laura Chen receives a trust fund for her child's education and expenses, $2 million. The remaining $11 million? Community programs, shelters for elderly abuse victims, legal aid for families dealing with inheritance fraud, and," I hesitated, then continued, "a scholarship fund for nursing students, in honor of the young woman who tried to save my son." "That's very generous, Helena. It's necessary. This can't happen to another family." As we finished the paperwork, Laura appeared in the doorway, still wearing yesterday's clothes but looking rested. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are news vans outside." Of course there were. Phoenix's social event of the year had become its crime story of the decade. "Let them wait," Pat said. "Helena, you need to control this narrative." "How?" "Press conference, this afternoon. Tell your story before Jessica's lawyers spin it." The thought of facing cameras, explaining my blindness to Jessica's evil, made me want to hide. But Michael had faced his dangers head on. I could do the same. 3 o'clock, I decided. Here, in the garden where Michael proposed to Jessica. "That's cruel," Charles observed. That's justice, I corrected. She stood in that garden and promised to love my son forever. I want her to see the footage from prison, to know that's where her lies were exposed. Thomas's phone buzzed. He answered, his face grave. Jessica just fired her public defender. She's hired Martin Fitzgerald. The room went silent. Fitzgerald was Arizona's most notorious defense attorney, famous for getting killers reduced sentences through emotional manipulation of juries. How? She has no money. Someone's paying. We're tracking the source. Another player in this game. Another threat to justice. It doesn't matter, I said with more confidence than I felt. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have the truth. The truth doesn't always win in court, Charles warned. Then we'll make sure it does this time, for Michael, for all the victims. Laura stepped forward. Mrs. Morrison, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything Michael told me. Fitzgerald won't break me. Looking at this young woman carrying my grandchild, I felt something shift. The family I'd lost was gone, but a new one was forming. Different, unexpected, but real. We'll face him together, I promised. Right now, sitting here telling you this story, I can see some of you shaking your heads. How did I not see it? How did I let her fool me for 3 years? The truth is, when someone you love dies, you'll cling to anyone who shares that grief. Jessica knew that. She weaponized my pain. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, type strong in the comments. Let's build a community of survivors who refuse to be victims. And if this story is helping you recognize red flags in your own life, please share it. You might save someone's life, literally. Like and subscribe if you want to hear how a grandmother-to-be brought down an entire murder network. Now, let me tell you about the press conference. At exactly 3 o'clock, I stood before 40 reporters in my garden, the same garden where Michael had proposed to Jessica 7 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks as I approached the microphone Thomas's team had set up. Good afternoon. My name is Helena Morrison, and last night my daughter-in-law tried to murder me at my retirement party. No preamble. No soft edges. The reporters leaned forward collectively. But this story begins 3 years ago, when Jessica Morrison murdered my son Michael by cutting his brake lines. She did this because he discovered her affair and planned to divorce her. A reporter shouted, "Do you have proof?" The FBI has extensive evidence, including a confession from her accomplice and documentation my son gathered before his death. Jessica Morrison is not who she claimed to be. Her real name is Jennifer Walsh, and she's killed before. The questions came rapid fire, but I stayed controlled, channeling my boardroom presence. Yes, I'd been deceived. No, I hadn't suspected until recently. Yes, I was establishing a foundation in Michael's honor. Mrs. Morrison, a young reporter called out, Jessica's attorney claims you orchestrated this entire event to frame her for your son's death. How do you respond? I respond with facts. The FBI has been investigating her for 3 years. 50 federal agents attended my party. The poison she put in my champagne came from her purse. Her mother has confessed to their crimes. Martin Fitzgerald can spin whatever story he wants, but evidence doesn't lie. What about the baby? Someone asked. Jessica claimed she was trying to have Michael's child when he died. Laura stepped forward. I hadn't known she was there. I'm Laura Chen. I was Michael Morrison's friend and colleague at Phoenix General. Jessica Morrison had her tubes tied at 21. There was never going to be a baby. But Michael has a legacy, the children he helped at the hospital, the corruption he exposed, and the foundation that will continue his work. Who are you to the family? I took Laura's hand. She's the daughter Michael would have chosen, and she's carrying the grandchild I thought I'd never have. Not Michael's biological child, but someone he brought into our lives. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand with you when the truth comes out. Governor Holbrook joined us. The state of Arizona is committed to prosecuting not just Jessica Morrison, but the entire network she was part of. We've identified 12 victims across 4 states. This ends now. Mrs. Morrison, how does it feel to know your daughter-in-law killed your son? The question hung in the desert air like a challenge. How did it feel? like drowning in reverse. All the grief I'd processed rushing back as rage. It feels like justice delayed but not denied. My son died trying to protect me from her. Now I'll spend whatever time I have left making sure she pays for that. Even if it means the death penalty?
Especially if it means that. She didn't just kill Michael. She killed the future we should have had. Grandchildren, family dinners, normal life. She stole 3 years of my life, making me comfort his killer. Yes, I want her executed. The bluntness shocked them. Good. I was done with polite society's expectations. One last question, an older journalist said. What would Michael think of all this? I considered lying, giving them something poetic about forgiveness. But Michael deserved truth. He'd be heartbroken that someone he loved could be so evil. But he'd be proud that we exposed her, that his death led to saving others. And he'd tell me to stop crying and start building something better from the ashes. As if on cue, a dust devil swirled through the garden, scattering rose petals from the bushes Michael had planted for his mother's birthday 5 years ago. The cameras captured it all, the symbolic destruction and rebirth in one frame. Thank you all for coming. The Michael Morrison Foundation will officially launch next month. Information is available on our website. No more questions. I walked back into my house, my crime scene, my haunted palace, with Laura and Pat beside me. The reporters kept shouting questions, but I was done performing. Inside, Thomas Reed waited with news. Jessica's been denied bail. She's in solitary for her own protection. Apparently, the other inmates don't like child killers or elder abusers. Good. The trial starts in 3 months. Are you ready? I looked at the photo of Michael on the mantel, not the formal one from his funeral, but a candid shot from his last birthday, laughing at something off camera. That was my son. Not the victim Jessica created, but the man who'd lived with purpose. I'm ready. The Phoenix Superior Courthouse hadn't seen crowds like this since the Baseline Killer trial. I sat in the front row, Laura beside me with baby Michael sleeping in her arms. 6 months had transformed us both. She from frightened young woman to confident foundation director, me from betrayed widow to avenging matriarch. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Catherine Walsh asked. We have, Your Honor. Jessica sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her beauty dissolved by imprisonment. No designer clothes could hide what she was now, a convicted killer facing judgment. Martin Fitzgerald had tried everything, even suggesting I'd orchestrated Michael's death for insurance money, but the evidence was overwhelming. On the count of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom. Guilty, guilty, guilty. On the count of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty. 23 counts in total, all guilty. Jessica turned to look at me then, those green eyes that had cried at Michael's funeral now empty of everything but hate. I held her gaze steadily. This was justice. Sentencing is scheduled for next month, Judge Walsh announced. The defendant is remanded to custody. As they led Jessica away, she suddenly screamed, "You destroyed everything! You couldn't just die like you were supposed to!" The courtroom erupted, but I remained calm. No, Jessica, you destroyed everything. I just survived. Outside, the Phoenix sun was blazing at 115 degrees, but the heat felt cleansing. Reporters surrounded us, but Pat's security detail kept them at bay. Mrs. Morrison, how do you feel? Like my son can finally rest. We drove to Paradise Valley Cemetery, where Michael was buried. I'd had his headstone replaced. Instead of beloved husband, it now read, beloved son, truth seeker, protector. Laura placed baby Michael on the grass beside the grave. Your uncle would have loved you, she whispered to the infant. He would have, I agreed. But you'll know him through the foundation, through the lives he saved, through the truth he died defending. Dorothy had been sentenced the week before, 25 years with no possibility of parole. She'd testified against Jessica, revealing the full network.
17 women across 6 states were now in custody. The FBI called it the largest elder fraud ring in American history.
Helena, Thomas Reed approached. He'd stayed in Phoenix to see the case through. There's something else. We tracked the money that paid for Fitzgerald.
Who?
Another member of the network. She's already been arrested in California. Jessica was supposed to recruit new members after securing your fortune. When she failed, they tried to save her to protect themselves. It's really over? This part is. But Helena, you've started something. The Foundation has already helped identify 3 suspicious deaths in Nevada. Your story has encouraged other victims to come forward. Baby Michael stirred, opening eyes that were surprisingly blue, like my Michael's had been. Genetics were strange. This child shared no blood with my son, but somehow carried his spirit.
Mrs. Morrison, Laura said softly, the Foundation's first pediatric center opens tomorrow. Will you cut the ribbon?
Michael should do it, I said, touching the baby's tiny hand.
The next generation, building on the last. We stood in the cemetery as the sun began to set. 3 generations bound not by blood, but by choice, by survival, by the strange grace that comes from tragedy transformed into purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Charles Brennan. Jessica got death penalty, execution scheduled for 2030. 5 years. She'd spend 5 years knowing exactly when and how she'd die. The same way she'd planned my death, measured and deliberate. There was poetry in that justice. We should go, Laura said. The baby needs to eat. Yes, I agreed, but lingered for one more moment at Michael's grave. We got her, son. We got them all. The wind through the Palo Verde trees sounded almost like a response, like approval, like peace. That night, in my modest Paradise Valley cottage, I sat writing in the journal I'd started. Today, justice was served, not revenge, justice. Tomorrow we build. The Michael Morrison Foundation will save lives my son never got to save. Laura and little Michael will have the family Jessica tried to steal. And I'll live whatever years remain knowing that from the ashes of betrayal, we built something beautiful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, living purposefully, living free. The moral was clear. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's how we save ourselves. I'm Helena Morrison, 65 years old now, grandmother to a beautiful boy, and CEO of a foundation that's already saved 3 lives. If my story touched your heart, if it made you think about the relationships in your own life, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear that survival is possible, that justice exists, that family isn't always blood. Subscribe for more stories of strength and courage. Comment below with your own survival story. Let's build a community of warriors who refuse to be victims. And remember, trust your instincts. They might just save your life. Goodbye, friends.